What's good? It's Wood. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Vasiliy Lomachenko, 16 wins and 2 losses, taking on Jamaine Ortiz, 16 wins, 0 losses, and 1 draw. This is the return of Vasiliy Lomachenko, a long-time pound-for-pound top 3 fighter in the sport, has been in Ukraine, his hometown, during the Russian invasion, which is, temporarily postponed his career a bit. His last fight was last December against Richard Comey. And Vasiliy Lomachenko is in one of the hottest divisions right now, where Devin Haney just defended his undisputed lightweight champion status against George Kambosos in their rematch. And so if Lomachenko handles business here against Jamaine Ortiz, he stands to be the next challenger for Devin Haney's lightweight belts. That's assuming Devin Haney doesn't immediately go up to 140 right now, given the reality that Haney has had some issues making 135 in recent fights, but for some time. So Lomachenko, he is a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, one of the best amateurs in boxing history. And so when he turned pro, he pretty much hit the ground running. His second fight was for a vacant WBO featherweight belt against Orlando Salido. Controversial fight. Salido missed weight. Salido was roughhousing, hitting below the belt in several moments during that fight, and Salido edged a split decision win over Lomachenko. And I remember the press not even cooling off on their adoration for Lomachenko and his abilities. So Lomachenko's very next fight, again, at one point in his career, he was 1-1 professionally. But his next fight was arguably one of his top 3 wins to date. And that was against a prime Gary Russell Jr. So this fight was for a vacant WBO featherweight belt as well, because remember, even in beating Lomachenko, Salido missed weight, so he didn't have a chance to win the belt. So in Lomachenko's next fight, he fights Gary Russell Jr. for that belt, and he wins a close majority decision against the super speedy-handed. I've always looked at Gary Russell Jr. as having arguably the fastest hands in boxing, pound for pound. It's a very short list of fighters who have the hand speed of a Gary Russell Jr. It's really something to behold, and Lomachenko beating Gary Russell Jr. automatically solidified him and made a lot of people believers in this dude that we've been hearing so much about in Vasiliy Lomachenko. And so after that, he just goes on this pretty incredible run where he, earned the name like the Matrix. And it was because of how he could sometimes sit around in the pocket and not get touched, and the way that he was taking so many angles, and the sweet science nature of his game, given his outlier-like athleticism. Look at some of his training regimen. This guy's not your typical athlete. Look at some of the, the handstand walks that he does, some of the coordination drills that he does. But after beating Gary Russell Jr., he wins his next 3 fights against lesser name opponents, and then he goes up to 130, where he claims another WBO title against Roman Rocky Martinez, and he knocked Martinez clean out in the 5th round. And then in his next fight, he has what I consider to be another one of his top 3 wins of his career, and it's against a then undefeated Nicholas Walters, the same Nicholas Walters who knocked Nonito Donaire out when Donaire was, fighting at 126. The Axe Murderer, they called him. Super power puncher, just good all-around fighter. I remember his name started flirting up in certain people's, pound-for-pound rankings. Nicholas Walters did. So Vasiliy Lomachenko made Walters quit on the stool after the 7th round, and this is around the time he earned the nickname Lomachenko, because he got Nicholas Walters to quit on the stool. I believe he got Jason Sosa I'd have to recheck the Jason Sosa one, but he got Miguel Mariaga to quit on the stool, and he got the much undersized Guillermo Rigondeaux to quit on the stool. It was remarkable. He was outclassing people to the point where they just decided between rounds, I don't want to take this anymore. It was really something truly special. And I know that Guillermo Rigondeaux is a future Hall of Famer, but I don't see that as being one of Lomachenko's best wins, because they were clearly not the same size. It's yes, Errol Spence Jr. beat Mikey Garcia, but would you call it a top 3 win for Errol Spence, given that Mikey Garcia basically was 2 divisions up from where he probably should have been? Guillermo Rigondeaux really didn't have any business in the ring with Lomachenko, but Lomachenko handled business there, again, got Rigondeaux to quit on the stool, And then Lomachenko, again, he was a WBO champ at featherweight, WBO champ at 130, and then he went to 135 where he beat Jose Pedraza, Anthony Crolla, and Luke Campbell. Now, these fights were around the same time Lomachenko was battling, his first of a few shoulder injuries where he would either get, a procedure between fights, but these fights kind of marked what many, and I consider to be Vasiliy Lomachenko's size ceiling. Basically, fighting at 135 it's not necessarily a bridge too far, but these fights against Pedraza and Campbell, not so much Crolla, he knocked him clean out in the 4th round. And by the way, Jorge Linares, that was his first fight at lightweight. So he goes up to lightweight, beats Linares in a very tough fight. He gets dropped. Lomachenko gets dropped in that fight, ends up finishing Linares, I believe, with a body shot, and he wins the lightweight WBO belt. So he is basically, he's challenging for a belt in his debut fight in all these divisions. You notice that? Like his first fight at 130 was a fight for the belt. His second professional fight altogether was for the belt. And his first fight at 135 was for the WBA belt. He wins that against Linares, and then he beats Pedraza, Crolla, and Campbell. And Pedraza and Campbell, they go the distance against Lomachenko, which if you look at his several fights before that, people were not going 12 rounds with Lomachenko. But again, Luke Campbell acquitted himself really well, had his moments, won a few rounds against Lomachenko. Same thing with Jorge Linares, very competitive fight. Lomachenko went through a period of his career where his fights weren't even that competitive. So 135 lightweight was kind of looking like a different can of worms for Lomachenko. So the win over Luke Campbell was in August of 2019, and then COVID hit March 2020. So Lomachenko's basically out of the ring for just a couple months more than a year, basically from August 2019 to October 2020, where he then fights a very young and very ambitious Teofimo Lopez. Most people thought this was a bad idea for Teofimo Lopez to fight somebody with the legendary status and the experience of Lomachenko so early in a young fighter's career. Yes, we saw Teofimo Lopez knock out Richard Comey. Yes, we saw him looking just scintillating with his punching power and his, hand speed, his hair trigger, counter punch reflex, and so forth. But the odds were heavily stacked towards Lomachenko. This is one of those things that people forget over time, like who was the favorite here? Teofimo Lopez wasn't supposed to beat Lomachenko, and those who did think Teo was going to beat Loma thought that he might catch him with something hard or catch him late, basically would stop him. We didn't think that he was going to win a unanimous decision over Vasiliy Lomachenko. And this fight at the time, it was looked to be a battle of undisputed because Lomachenko was the WBC franchise champion. And so the WBC basically made that belt transferable in the buildup to Lomachenko versus Lopez. I don't know why they did it. It caused a lot of confusion, but Lomachenko versus Lopez was seen to be for all of the belts. Lomachenko was coming in with all the other belts. Devin Haney was the WBC regular champ, but Teofimo Lopez was coming in with the IBF lightweight belt that he had won off of Richard Comey. So Teofimo Lopez basically shocked the boxing world. This was kind of seen as being, the performance of the year. Teofimo Lopez went from being like a hot prospect, contender, belt holder to being one of the biggest attractions pound for pound in boxing. Not necessarily box office wise, but in terms of having the respect of the boxing community, basically. You beat Lomachenko, that puts you on another level. Teofimo Lopez did that. So since then, Lomachenko has fought twice against good fighters, Nakatani, Richard Comey. He gave Nakatani the beating of a lifetime. And there were some people who thought Nakatani was going to pose an interesting matchup issue for Lomachenko, given Lomachenko's getting a little bit older now. Nakatani looked really good against Teofimo Lopez a couple fights prior. Nakatani's, stopped Felix Verdejo in a very good fight. And, just his, ranginess. He's about 6 feet tall. He's got the super long arms, punches hard from weird angles, seems very durable. He just, he could gut it out as well. So Nakatani was, we wanted to see what was going to happen with Loma and Nakatani. And again, this resulted in a brutal increasingly one-sided beatdown. Yes, it was kind of interesting in the first couple rounds. Lomachenko received a cut on his head due to a head clash, but he ended up just beating the hell out of Nakatani. Nakatani has fought a couple fights since, and he's been successful in those. And I tend to think that he might be a good, 135-pound debut fight for Shakur Stevenson. That's another conversation for another day. But Nakatani got stopped in the 9th round against Lomachenko. And again, watch that one. You start to feel pretty bad for Nakatani. Lomachenko does not play. And it's like, just when we think, okay, maybe he's too old, maybe he's over the hill, maybe he's, not as good as all that stuff. Well, when you have a performance like he had against Nakatani, and then a beatdown of Richard Commey. Now, Commey went the distance, but a beatdown of Richard Commey, this forces you to reevaluate. Like, no, maybe Lomachenko is still the same beast that he was. I mean, he's looking dangerous. He's looking strong at 135. I think he's looking stronger in these last 2 fights at 135 than he was in his first couple fights at 135 against Linares, Pedraza, and so forth. So again, that fight against Richard Commey, Lomachenko's most recent fight, that was in December of 2021. Now on October 29th, he's about to fight Jamaine Ortiz, who is coming off of a very good win against Jamel Herring. Jamel Herring basically went from 130 to 135 after Herring got, the hell beat out of him by Shakur Stevenson in arguably at that point, at least one of Shakur Stevenson's best performances. Like, he looked remarkable in those early rounds, and he ended up stopping Jamel Herring. Then Herring went up from 130 to 135, fights Jamaine Ortiz, and Jamaine Ortiz wins this fight by a couple of rounds. He looked very athletic against Herring. He was putting punches together very quickly, and he had some boxing acumen to him. Like, his nickname is the Technician. This guy isn't just like a brute who's looking for a big punch. He's still young. Jamaine Ortiz is 26 years old. He's still undefeated, and now he's got that name, Jamel Herring, on his resume. And by the way, 2 fights prior to that, he fought a majority draw against hot prospect Joseph Adorno. This was a case of hot prospect versus hot prospect. It's kind of rare, but Top Rank will do that sometimes. And in Jamaine Ortiz versus Joseph Adorno, Adorno was the puncher. Jamaine Ortiz was seen to be the boxer. Jamaine Ortiz got dropped twice in that fight. He got dropped in the 2nd round, and he got dropped in the 7th round. And he still ended up earning a majority draw. Like, think about that. That tells you how good of a round winner Jamaine Ortiz was against Joseph Adorno. And he is a good round winner overall. If you look at his wins that aren't knockouts, most of them are via clear unanimous decision. Not too many split decision victories. I think he has maybe like 1 majority decision win early in his career. But everything after that is either a knockout or a unanimous decision win. Again, good round winner. Got dropped twice against hot prospect power puncher Adorno, but won most of the rounds of the fight, to where even in an 8-rounder, think about it, this wasn't even a 10-rounder where you need those extra couple rounds to catch up on the scorecards. This was an 8-rounder, so they basically gave him damn near every round that he did not get dropped. But yeah, that is basically the only blemish on Jamaine Ortiz's young record. And so now he's about to fight the legendary Vasiliy Lomachenko. And so what do I expect between Lomachenko and Jamaine Ortiz? I see Lomachenko, kind of gauging the hand speed, and Jamaine Ortiz will throw like nice, flashy looking 3 to 5 punch combinations sometimes. And sometimes he will get a little bit head over skis. Like the first knockdown against Adorno wasn't like a flush punch. It was Jamaine Ortiz coming in a little bit too hot and just kind of getting caught with a grazing punch and just getting basically knocked off balance. But when he is starting to get into his flow, he can let some nice, fast punches go. So I think Vasiliy Lomachenko might be a little bit patient in the first couple of rounds against Jamaine Ortiz. Again, sometimes when you think Lomachenko's going to do one thing, he might just come out with a head of steam against Jamaine Ortiz. I would caution against that, against the younger Jamaine Ortiz. But I see Ortiz starting to have some issues with Lomachenko's, not only is Lomachenko a southpaw, Jamaine Ortiz is orthodox, but it's really the angles and the styles and the feints. Like, Lomachenko will do do a lot of subtle like level changing to just get these very small reactions out of the opponent to basically open them up for like a quick sweeping right hook, lead right hook, and a straight left. He'll even kind of switch stances just with his footwork. He won't stay in an orthodox stance for very long, but as he's stepping into range or taking a different angle, he'll step in a way where it looks like his power hand is his backhand is his right hand, and he'll score that way as well. If Jamaine Ortiz, look, I could see a scenario where Jamaine Ortiz can't hang with Lomachenko for long periods in the pocket. So I kind of think that Jamaine Ortiz will become a bit of a mover once he realizes that tit for tat, Vasiliy Lomachenko is just much more of a technician than the guy whose nickname is the technician. I think that at that point, he might get on his bike a little bit and start to buy time to where he can survive a decision loss as opposed to getting stopped by Lomachenko. I think Lomachenko is going to start busting him up at a point. Like when Jamaine Ortiz fought Adorno, he got pretty bloody. I think his mouth was like open. I don't know if it was a broken jaw, but his mouth was open, you know, in the last few rounds against Adorno. I think Lomachenko, especially with this, you know, with this mid-30s strength, like I think he's got a different physicality to him than he did earlier in his career. And some of that I think is just having a longer professional career. When he came in from such a long, extensive, esteemed amateur background, that is more like a I'll fight you at distance type of game. Whereas in the pros, he learned quickly against Orlando Salido, no, this is a whole different ball of wax. So Lomachenko, I feel, has gotten stronger and more physical throughout his career. I think he might even muscle Jamaine Ortiz around a bit. And I get it. Jamaine Ortiz is like a little bit taller than Lomachenko, and he's a naturally bigger guy. But again, look, unless Lomachenko's abilities have kind of hit a cliff, given, you know, he's 34 years old. I think he turns 35 like in February of 2023. So he's 34 years old right now. He just spent a lot of time in the Ukraine. I mean, he usually takes care of himself, but you never know about these things in terms of how long a fighter can maintain their elite skills and abilities. Like once Roy Jones got knocked out in his rematch against Antonio Tarver, he really never was the same Roy Jones again. And not that Lomachenko has suffered a knockout. I mean, he had a close decision loss against Teofimo Lopez where he started off pretty slow. Like it took him like a good 4 or 5 rounds before he got cooking. But I don't think that this is going to be the fight that reveals a noticeable degradation in Lomachenko's abilities. I think he beats Jamaine Ortiz. I was kind of on the fence on whether he stops him or beats him via decision. I think he takes control of the fight, starts busting him up like he was busting Comey up. Comey had to stand around in the pocket, dig deep to survive that fight. I think that, and to go the distance. I mean, but Comey took a beating as well. I think Jamaine Ortiz is going to be more of a mover, and I just don't think he's going to engage in as many, you know, heated rounds or heated exchanges during the second half of the fight once Lomachenko takes control. I think Jamaine Ortiz is going to make it the 12-round distance, but I think it's going to be a relatively lopsided, a surprisingly lopsided scorecard. I'm talking maybe more 9 rounds to 3 than 7 rounds to 5. I don't think this is going to be like a split decision win for Lomachenko. I think he's going to win at least 8 rounds, maybe 9 or 10 rounds, which, I mean, that would also be an impressive win against somebody who I think has a good future in the sport. I think Jamaine Ortiz is going to go on to do some things. I just think that this is a bridge too far too soon. You're talking about Lomachenko, and I think Lomachenko is still near prime enough to handily beat the young Jamaine Ortiz. But yeah, let me know what you think about Lomachenko and Ortiz. Is Ortiz capable of pulling off this upset? And if Lomachenko wins, do you think Devin Haney sticks around at lightweight to defend his lightweight belts, his undisputed status against the legendary Vasiliy Lomachenko? If I'm advising Devin Haney, if he can make weight, because that's a big question. If you can't make weight, go up to 140. You don't want to, like, you know, harm yourself trying to make weight, and you don't want to come into a fight against Lomachenko in a less than optimal condition where your performance is impacted by the weight cut. But if Devin Haney can still do it, I mean, this would be by far the most significant win and opponent that Devin Haney would have fought. Yes, it's good to have beaten Jorge Linares, Joseph Jojo Diaz. Even that Zayor Abdullayev win for Devin Haney is going to age well. Abdullayev just stopped Linares. And then obviously the back-to-back wins against George Kambosos. But when you beat a Lomachenko, that goes from, yes, you are a champion, an undisputed champion, to, damn, we are going to start having to talk Hall of Fame. And Devin Haney's only like 23 years old. So if Haney can stay at 135, I think it's well worth it to fight a Lomachenko. And I mean, that would just be a great fight for boxing. But I'm really curious to see how Lomachenko looks in his return from Ukraine against Jamaine Ortiz. Let me know what you think about the fight in the comments. Please like the video. And by the way, Lomachenko, I know a lot of people also want to see him fight Shakur Stevenson, who just arrived at 135 after, missing weight in his last fight against Robson Conceição in a fight that Shakur Stevenson looked great. And so now he's going to be a lightweight. I think that Lomachenko will first challenge for Devin Haney's undisputed lightweight status before he then pivots and perhaps fights Shakur Stevenson down the line in a fight that I'm sure everybody wants to see. We want to see Stevenson and Lomachenko. We want to see Devin Haney, Lomachenko. We want to see all kinds of permutations of those lightweights / 140-pound fighters, don't we? But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.